I remember it all as if it happened only yesterday. Mother sat up and was reaching for my little sister when a mini ball struck Mother in the breast. As soon as possible, she was given treatment, but she never recovered, and 3 weeks later, she died. None of the rest of us were injured. The baby died a few years later. One of the other children, my brother, William Henry Cave, was with us when it happened. He was 10 years old then and is still living at the age of 85 at Everett, Washington. An account from Jesse M. Cave in the Independence Examiner from August 14th, 1937.
Emily just gave us an account from Jesse Cave's perspective of the Civil War battle that happened in his hometown of Lone Jack, Missouri, which is where we investigated, and that's what this episode is going to be about. And we went there just a couple weekends after the battle took place, between August 15th and 16th. So we were there, 170 some years later, about the same time of year, and it was a very muggy day.
It was awful, and the bugs were so loud.
Yeah,
it was insane.
We not even sure if we got anything from our cemetery EVP session because the bugs are so loud.
It's just literally, it sounds like we're full on in a jungle. Just we probably could have told you we went to the Amazon. We were like, you totally did. Wow.
It's also something interesting to note when we were researching let's go to the battlefield of Lone Jack. We're thinking we'd be out. I don't know, when you think of a battlefield, I guess you just think it's kind of remote or outside a city. No, this is literally on the main road of Lone Jack, just right. You can see it from the main highway, pretty much.
We pulled up. It literally looks like just a little city park, and we were thinking because we went and we stopped for dinner on the way there, and we got this big burger, and we're like, oh, it's fine. We're gonna walk it off. We've got so much walking to do. And we pull up and we're like, what the hell?
It's this tiny.
It's so tiny.
Now, of course, the area has been developed, so the battlefield was bigger originally, but this is a kind of a unique battle. It did actually happen right there in town. It wasn't, in a field far away. So I guess that was just some of our, realizing it in the moment.
Yeah, and I guess, jeez, very loud person getting out of his truck. Anyways, I guess, the town setup is somewhat similar to what it used to be, and that the main road is still in the same place, and it still cuts through the town in the same area. It's just kind of, they rebuilt Lone Jack after the battle because many of the structures didn't survive.
Yeah, there were wood structures at the time, which we'll get into later, but
this is kind of a newer format for us. We did things, one of the good things about kind of, I think the way we've started our podcast is we've been able to explore kind of how we want to structure it and record things, and we've started doing a little bit more active investigating, and we have some separate recordings we took from a historian we spoke with at Lone Jack, and then some bits from our investigation, and then a few other things that you'll hear later.
Yeah, so I think, I don't know, I like the direction we're going, and hopefully you do too.
And I feel like we've got a really exciting, like I'm going to elementary school with a really cool show and tell thing. Just I'm so excited to show you what I got.
I know, there's so many good parts to share, so yeah.
First, we gotta start with the history, I guess.
I know, right? I just always gotta bore people first,
and then down with all the facts.
But I'm gonna have the historian from the Lone Jack Historical Society, Dan
Hadley.
He's gonna help me tell the history of Lone Jack, so it won't just be my voice you're listening to.
Or it is. It's Kayla.
It is just really good at.
She is so great at impersonations.
Yeah.
Guys. Oh my god.
No. But before we jump into the specific Battle of Lone Jack, I want to kind of set up what led to the Battle of Lone Jack, especially because it wasn't a planned battle. It was kind of just an impromptu fight that happened. So I kind of want to lead up to the few days and years before that kind of set up this battle happening. So Missouri, pre and during the Civil War, it's a complicated history. Missouri was pretty evenly divided on pro and anti-slavery. Missouri was admitted to the Union as a state that allowed slavery as part of the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which also had Maine admitted as a free state in exchange for legislation which prohibited slavery in those remaining Louisiana Purchase lands north of the 3630 parallel, which is a circle of latitude north of the equator and used to divide the prospective slave and free states west of the Mississippi River, with the exception of Missouri, which is mostly north of this parallel. So Missouri is like this complicated puzzle piece that doesn't want to fit where it should. And that Missouri Compromise of 1820 both delayed the Civil War and sowed its seeds. By 1860, Missouri had 114,931 slaves, and the state's population at the time was a little over 1 million. It's like, that's a long number for me to read.
That's like too complicated. I can't math so hard that I can't even read numbers.
1,182,012?
Yeah.
Is that how you would say that?
I don't know. I'm not confident about saying a number over 10.
Math class was a while ago, but...
And I failed almost all of them.
And also just an interesting piece of information I found in my research is that Missouri was exempt from President Lincoln's 1863 Emancipation Proclamation, decreeing the freedom of slaves in all territories then held by Confederate forces. So it wasn't until January 11th, 1865, that a Missouri State Convention approved an ordinance abolishing slavery in Missouri by a vote of 60-4. So, I don't know. I guess I
didn't know that.
I didn't realize there was exemptions in his
it's just
emancipation.
Like, all of this, except for you guys, continue being awful. It's okay. I know it's hard.
Yeah, I had no idea. So that's why history is good to learn, folks. So, anyways, I just gave you a lot of dates and numbers and information. And I'm not done just yet. As I said in our previous episodes, the American Civil War really started 7 years prior along the Missouri and Kansas border in 1854. And I kind of just feel like that border war is glossed over in a lot of history books, or at least in my American history classes, it just wasn't discussed in detail. And so Emily and I are just learning a lot about the bad folks based in this Missouri-Kansas area during the Civil War, and we just want to tell these stories and this history. And there's just so much going on in the area of Kansas City during the Civil War, and all that conflict and violence and bloodshed that happened here when this area was trying to become more than just a cow town just makes me think that it's a good recipe for hauntings. There's theories why this area is so haunted, and maybe it has to do with the river. Maybe it has to do with all the feuds that kind of still exist today in a way, but Missouri was the site of 1,162 battles and skirmishes during the official years of the Civil War, an amount exceeded only by Virginia and Tennessee. So don't tell me that's not leaving a violent mark on this state, and likely a reason behind a lot of these hauntings.
Yeah.
So 4 days prior to the Battle of Lone Jack was the first Battle of Independence. It took place on August 11th, 1862, in the city of Independence, located in Jackson County, Missouri. During the summer of 1862, strong recruiting efforts for the Confederacy and Missouri State Guard were consolidated in northwestern Missouri to replenish the depleted ranks for the Trans-Mississippi forces. The recruiters were most notably aided by William Quantrill and his guerrillas and bushwhackers, who later became known as Quantrill's Raiders and included the likes of Frank and Jesse James and Cole Younger. Up until the first Battle of Independence, the Confederacy had basically turned a blind eye to Quantrill. He was a very bad man, and though he fought in brutal guerrilla-style warfare, because of all his victories, the Confederacy secured his loyalty by making him an official captain in the Confederate Army. The Confederacy needed a victory in this divided area of Missouri, and under the command of Confederate Colonel John T. Hughes and guerrilla leader William Quantrill, the Confederate forces of over 700 soldiers descended upon the Union forces occupying Independence, Missouri. The Union forces were mostly taken by surprise in the pre-dawn attack, resulting in 4 killed, 18 wounded, and 312 missing or captured Union soldiers. Though this battle resulted in a Confederate victory, it was costly. They lost 10 experienced officers, including Colonel Hughes, and wounding Colonel Hayes and Thompson. The Confederates also failed to take Kansas City and Westport, leaving the Union to maintain a slight advantage in Jackson County. So the Confederates turned their attention to Lone Jack, Missouri, also in Jackson County. So that is kind of summarizing the events leading up to the Battle of Lone Jack. And so now I'm going to switch over to Dan telling the history.
Well, why was there even a battle in Lone Jack? Well, because that summer of 1862, there were predominantly Missourian, but there were a few Arkansans thrown in because they had come up from Arkansas. They got chased out of the state by Union troops. A lot of Southern sympathizing forces did, and kind of hunkered down in northern Arkansas. When 62 came around and summer came around, these Missouri troops in exile essentially wanted to come back up into their stomping grounds and recruit and try to get men to join the ranks and build the army back up. So, and Lone Jack was a predominantly Southern sympathizing community. The Caves and the Snows and the Falconberry, so many of them came from North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, and so on and so forth. So this was friendly territory for Confederate troops who wanted to set up a recruiting camp, and that's what they did. And it wasn't one big army that marched up. There were individual commands of several hundred, maybe around 150, upwards of 500, and each of them going by the name of their commander. And they were all mounted. They come up from Arkansas mounted, so they're cavalry. So you had Colonel Sidney Jackman's cavalry, Colonel Upton Hayes' cavalry, Colonel John Trousdale Coffey's cavalry. And you couldn't swing a dead cow without hitting a colonel, so they're all these colonels, And they were all coming up together. They were independent, autonomous commands, but they were working in concert with one another in case a threat arose, and that's precisely what ended up happening here at Lone Jack. So here they are.
It wasn't a planned battle, but it
exactly. Yeah. But they knew they were up in this territory. There's a chance it could happen, and indeed it did. So, but they're trying to stay off the radar of Union forces that control the population centers, like Kansas City or Independence or Lexington.
As Dan mentioned, the Union is aware of the growing forces of the bushwhackers and the rising presence of Confederate officers in the area of Lone Jack. A Union force of 800 soldiers under Major Emory Foster was to converge at Lone Jack with 500 soldiers under the command of General Fitzhenry Warren. From Lone Jack, the united troops of 1,300 would attempt to squeeze the bushwhackers between the Missouri River and then the 2,500 soldiers under General James Gilpatrick Blunt, who was pressing north from Fort Scott, Kansas.
They all end up going to Lexington, where he was formally placed in charge of this column of cavalry, and it was just shy of around 900 strong. And they attached to that column two mounted cannons. They call it field artillery or light artillery, is a cannon that could be pulled by horses, okay? But it wasn't really that light. The cannon and the carriage weighed about the same as your or my car, so it was pretty heavy. But anyway, so then they left out of Lexington, Missouri at dawn on August 15th. Took them the better part of the day and the evening to get down here. It's about 35 odd miles as the crow flies. But imagine that column. They came right down this road. It's called Bynum Road now. It was just called the main road then. Came rumbling down. Imagine a column of almost 1,000 horsemen coming past after dark, on August 15th. And he was ready. Foster, even though he was only 21 years old, soon to be 22, even at that tender age, he had already developed a reputation as a very aggressive and capable leader. And that's why he was placed in charge of all the troops here. So, but he didn't waste any time. He was able to gather some intelligence that there were some Confederates camped south of town. And those were the troops of John Charles Tracy, Colonel John Charles Tracy, and Colonel Coffee. And indeed, they were camped south of town, but in the dark. But when you have a fight at nighttime, it can be very dangerous because you can actually have friendly fire, a lot of confusion. But in spite of that, Foster had the 2 cannon brought to the front, unlimbered, and went forward. He deployed skirmishers and had a little night skirmish about a mile south of town with some Confederates there. Fired the cannon, boom, they scattered into the darkness, okay? But the other Confederates who were camped elsewhere, the majority to the northwest, if you're about 2 miles off of where a road called Carrico Road now runs, they heard those cannon booming, okay, late at night, around midnight or thereabouts, and they immediately knew, okay, we have a situation on our hands. So, and all the commanders, all those colonels got together and had a late night council of war meeting. Okay, what are we going to do? They'd already sent some spies out to try to gather some intelligence, even though it was dark, find out how many Union soldiers there were. Enough of them to have 2 cannon, so it was a substantial force. But they unanimously voted to stay and fight instead of slipping away under cover of darkness. So the plan they cooked up was, we'll take all of our troops, and they'd been recruiting. They had hundreds of new young and not so young men who joined up, okay? And a lot of them look like those 3 guys over there on the right side of that banner there. We have a photograph of them in the museum as well. Those are local Lone Jack boys who joined up to fight in the battle just days before the battle. They fought in Hayes's cavalry. So the Confederates' snapshot of what they look like, they just, with the exception of maybe some officers that had a uniform of some sort, but not a lot of spit and polish military stuff going on. A lot of the soldiers just wearing whatever clothing they had. They brought their own horses, brought their own weapons. When they joined up, they weren't issued anything. They had nothing to issue them. So the Confederates had old military muskets. They had hunting rifles, double-barrel shotguns, pistols. So a real hodgepodge of weaponry. Going up against these Union troops who were better trained, better equipped, better armed. And this kind of set the stage for the battle that erupted. So they crept across that field over there in the pre-dawn hours. Some Confederates give the account that they crept close enough to the road. There was a stake and rail fence that ran parallel to the road about 80 feet from the road. They got as close as that fence and they could hear the Union soldiers on this side of the road as they got up and began to prepare for the morning, doing all their stuff. But they launched the attack around 5:30 in the morning, and what ensued was a pretty chaotic, swirling kind of, I'd say urban warfare, but it's a very rural community, but house to house, kind of building to building kind of fighting that went on for about 5 hours or so.
Wow.
The Confederates, even though they had more untested troops, they had a slight numerical advantage. We don't have very firm numbers on the Confederate forces, but they had maybe over a couple of thousand troops total, but hundreds of them that had joined up weren't even armed. So they were left behind. The ammunition wagon, I think they only had one ammunition wagon, was behind the lines about a mile to the west, okay? And the unarmed troops were waiting there in reserve. But the Confederate troops advanced. So the battle went on for like 5 hours. But they were able to exploit their slight numerical advantage because they had around 1,500 or so armed combatants there, going up against around just under 1,000 Union soldiers. So as the fighting grinded on this blistering hot August day, they were able to extend their line and cross the road and do impromptu flanking movements, trying to envelop and actually attack the Union line from the rear, okay? And they were doing that. Colonel or Major Foster was wounded during the fighting. Captain Bronner took over for him, and they were just slowly being overwhelmed, okay, by the Confederates. So he made the prudent decision to fall back and retreat, do what's called an orderly retreat. They didn't like turn and run. They just
moved back,
just evacuated the scene of the fighting, left the Confederates in control of the field. So that technically, how scorekeeping goes in warfare. That makes him the winner of the Battle of Lone Jack. Okay, but they weren't, jumping up and clicking their heels either. They were licking their wounds, and they had a lot of casualties as well. Townspeople of Lone Jack came out of hiding after the fighting was over to a scene of this devastation. Almost every building here was a wood frame structure. This was a newly annexed part of town, so they didn't have any like large brick or stone structures. But many of them had been set fire during the battle to dislodge sharpshooters. So you had the smoking ruins of the Cave Hotel across the road, stables, outbuildings, whatnot, and the whole community here littered with dead and dying corpses of horses and men. So the townspeople of Lone Jack all just kind of pitched in and did what they could to care for the wounded and gather up the dead. Okay, yeah. And so you probably, if you read a little bit, you probably know that the majority of the dead from the battle are buried in the cemetery, and it became a cemetery. Because of that, there was no cemetery here at the time of the battle. There was no fence. That was just the edge of a cornfield. They put the fence up around 1900 or so, but in the days following the battle, they did the most expeditious thing they could do to inter the bodies. They're all lying in hot August sun. They're starting to decompose and all that. So,
yeah.
But they dug a trench grave for all the Union dead and a trench for all the Confederate dead. Loaded it up, filled it in. And they're there to this day. So that's pretty unique because on a lot of Civil War battlefields, the dead are disinterred or the bodies are removed into another more formal cemetery. But here they still lie or still rest where they were buried.
So that is the Battle of Lone Jack and what happened. But what of the paranormal consequences? So the Lone Jack Civil War Battlefield Museum and Soldier Cemetery is the only Civil War museum in Jackson County, Missouri, and one of the few battlefields where the soldiers who perished during the battle are still buried on the battlefield, and it has not been designated as a national cemetery. According to the Lone Jack Historical Society website, it was left to the Lone Jack residents to bury the dead, take in the wounded, and clean up the mess left by the battle. It is not known exactly who is buried on the battlefield. All the Union soldiers who died in the battle are presumed to be buried in the trenches, since the local citizens had no way of knowing who they were. The soldiers were buried in 2 long trenches, 8 feet in length, and buried in layers. Recently, a 3rd trench was discovered near the 2 long trenches where 18 men who died in the days after the battle are buried. It took nearly 3 days to dig the trenches and bury the dead. The residents were also left to dispose of almost 115 dead horses. It being August, the temperature was over 100 degrees, and the stench was so nauseating that they had to cover their noses with wet wool to be able to get near the battlefield. Their horses refused to come near the town square, and oxen had to be procured from neighboring farms to take care of the cleanup. So I would think that unmarked and disregarded graves are just a recipe for hauntings.
Yeah.
And without proper closure, that might very well explain.
Right. And it took a long time for them to get any monument up on both of the trenches, which is like a horrible way. Like only a couple of them, when we went to the cemetery, actually had the names of this specific person buried there.
And that was because their family knew they died there and wanted to pay for a marker.
Yeah, so it's interesting how long, and technically still to this day, some of the people in there have gone unrecognized. So it is interesting to think about and what, like, ramifications that might have, if any.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's kind of a weird... We had a picnic between the 2 trenches. No food involved. We just sat on a blanket on top of mass graves, which seems a little weird. But we did it.
We were trying to just reach out, and if they had something to say to us.
Yeah.
But
it was strange, but...
Unfortunately, I think the bug noises were too loud for us to be able to hear anyone that might have been reaching out.
Yeah, they might have been trying, and we just heard nothing but cicadas. So that was our experience with that.
Yeah.
But I guess is it my turn now?
Yeah, they're tired of hearing my voice.
All right. Well, I know we're only a few episodes into our podcast, but what I'm about to do feels like a pretty big departure from the normal layout because, I mean, you're the historian, obviously, in our group. You just went on about History Forever. You usually come with your PowerPoint setup of notes, and then I just learn, but not today.
You're taking over the professor title today?
I have some history today.
Love it.
I'm so proud.
I'm gonna sit back.
So, while I was researching the paranormal goings-ons in Lone Jack, I came to the conclusion, my wildly professional conclusion as a experienced ghost hunter.
Yes, go on.
Which I totally am. So I came to the conclusion that the type of haunting at Lone Jack might be residual. A lot of my speculating kind of goes back to an investigation conducted by a Kansas City paranormal group called Paranormal Activity Investigators, and I actually know one of the investigators in this group, Jennifer. She helped us kind of find a little bit of information and get kind of started on this investigation. She pointed us in Dan's direction, and anyways, they had a really good write-up on their investigation in Lone Jack, which included a very interesting EVP that I'll play later. But I will say that it kind of lends to my belief that maybe if there's something happening there, it's residual. So what is a residual haunting? Kayla, do you know?
I don't know. Give me I could probably ramble and make up something, but let's not waste our listeners' time with my ramblings.
No, the pop quiz.
Oh, well, I can try again.
No. All right. So basically, a residual haunting is where a ghost or ghosts are caught in sort of playing a scene on loop. It isn't what some would call like an intelligent haunting, where it can interact directly with the living or with their surroundings as they are in present day. So a lot of stories about ghosts and residual haunting will follow like the old blueprint of a house. Like even if it's changed, they'll walk paths that existed when they were there, which would be interesting for, say, like the Cave Hotel.
True, because it's not the original building. So
that's kind of a very quick summary of that. Like you couldn't talk to a ghost that's in a residual type haunting and get direct answers because they might not even know you're there or hear you. They might not even know they're dead, for example. So that's kind of a very base summary.
Could residual hauntings kind of be just an imprint of a moment? Or am I getting ahead of you?
You're getting ahead.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'll shut up now. I'll shut up.
So the idea of residual hauntings first got attention in the 19th century, but not really as a paranormal theory. Mathematician and quote-unquote thinker Charles Babbage, which like...
Can I be a quote-unquote thinker?
I think I'm a thinker, right? Do you just have to think to be a thinker? Because I'm adding that to my resume. Thinker.
In quotes, though.
Yeah, thinker. So Charles Babbage first thought up the concept that would later become what is known as place memory. So Babbage speculated that every word ever spoken by humanity remains suspended in the air years and years after they've become inaudible to human ears. Or most humans, that is. He did believe that some humans had the ability to tap into these leftover memories of speech and replay them, unlocking these bits of the past that have been stored in some sort of invisible, non-digital cloud type thing, for lack of a better comparison. So
interesting. I kind of like that theory.
I
don't know if I believe it, but that's actually, I don't know, that's a really cool thought.
Yeah, like it's not even necessarily paranormal, it's just a different understanding of how things work. Yeah. And I mean...
I don't know. There's so much about the world we don't understand.
Right. All right, so this concept became more fleshy, is what I said in my notes. Fleshy. In the 20th century with a man called Henry H. Price. Price was a Welsh philosopher who was known for his work in perception and parapsychology. He furthered the notion of place memory by speculating that a psychic ether existed alongside our visible reality and served as a place where all human memory was stored forever. These memories could attach themselves to a certain place or object and at times be replayed. Now, if you don't know if you remember, but when we were out to dinner, I mentioned to you about, I think it was called psychometry, or psychometry. I'm probably saying it wrong because I didn't put it in my notes, so Oops. But basically, that's the idea. Like, if you can touch something, if there's like a memory stored in that object, sometimes you can experience it. So I was like, hey, when we're at Lone Jack, touch some
that's
stuff.
right. Yeah, we were like, let's touch things.
Just to see if there's anything there. Nothing happened to my knowledge, but, there wasn't that much to touch.
No. Just some...
But that kind of plays into this place memory idea that memories can be stored in something, and that's not strictly speaking paranormal. It's just potentially a phenomena that we don't fully understand. So the last person I want to talk about was an archaeologist and parapsychologist, and his name's it's Thomas Charles Lethbridge. Very long name. So we're just going to call him Lethbridge from now on. Lethbridge published a book called Ghost and Ghoul in 1961, in which he shared a collection of stories from his explorations around the world. During his time as an archaeologist, Lethbridge came to believe that there was much to the earth that was left to be discovered, and that memory could be stored in fields of energy. So all of these ideas kind of compound on one another, and it's a lot of speculation. Like, from what I've read, there hasn't been a solid research into it, but enough people have experienced things that make them think something like this is possible, and it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, I think it's worth discussing.
Yeah. So I was curious about his book, because it sounds really cool. Like, it's an archaeologist who has ghost stories that he's collected from digs and all the places he's been. Like, it sounds really fun. But the book is very much out of print now because it costs about $800 to buy it. And that's a little bit out of my price range.
So if you all want to donate to our Patreon page so that we can buy this $800 book.
And we can do like a live reading, and we can read pages or chapters to you so everybody can enjoy the $800 ghost book.
That's true. We could digitally upload it.
Yeah, is that pirating?
Oh, how old's the book? Is it in the public space yet?
I don't know when that happens.
100 years.
I can't do math. I don't think so.
Oh, you said 1960. Oh, we got a ways to go.
All right. And that number
Just
is...
kidding. I'm not going to pirate a book.
When that time comes, if we're still alive, or, if we're not, do a seance, and we will read you the book that we will somehow have at that time.
In the afterlife.
Yes. We'll have a paranormal book club. No, that's not even paranormal. It's just... I don't know.
It's too hard for my brain to think about.
Yeah. But, I don't know. I feel like they need to make a movie about Charles Lethbridge, because I would totally watch it. It's like The Mummy, but with just ghosts. I don't know where he went, but I want a movie.
Sounds like he's a fascinating guy.
Yeah, he does. Like, he sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of movies.
I love movies.
Did you know that the most common name for the place memory theory came from a 1972 movie?
I did not.
So, the Stone Tape is a horror film about a Victorian mansion that has memories stored within the stones used to build it. So, essentially, cool. We should have a movie night and watch it, because it doesn't have the best ratings. I think it was like a 6.5 out of 10, but... essentially, they took all these ideas that had existed and they just kind of renamed it. And, it's the same concept. It's just that's the most popular kind of name going around for the theory now. I thought that was interesting. I didn't know that about there being a movie.
I had no idea either.
Kind of condensed all those ideas.
Love it.
But this theory has gained popularity over the years, particularly during the spiritualist movement of the 19th century. And this is just like a little bit of extra information that I found interesting. Many historians are kind of keying back to ancient cultures who have long-held beliefs about spiritual stones and the power they hold. Yeah. So, again, it's just interesting to think about. And there's so much that we don't know that there is. I don't think it's too crazy to think that that something like this could exist. And it's not even paranormal. It's just something we don't understand yet, where memories can be stored. Which kind of goes back to, what this meant to me with Lone Jack, where maybe there isn't an active ghost who's who's
residing,
who's unliving,
not a zombie,
who's just there as a ghost, doing ghost things day to day and actually aware that, Dan's bringing another tour group here. I should respond to their question. or anything like that.
So not an
Maybe-
intelligent spirit,
Yeah.
but a residual.
Right,
haunting.
and they're just playing back, maybe the battle because it was such a strong memory and, most likely what killed said ghost. Or maybe it's not even a ghost. Maybe it's just the memory of the moment that happened there that left an imprint because there was so much energy all at once.
Right.
And it's stored in this psychic ether thing. I never know how to say that word. Ether,
I think ether.
Esther.
Not Esther. There might have been an Esther. It's an old name.
Maybe. There's an Esther up in there in the ghost cloud. So yeah, that's kind of just summarizing it because there's not a lot of stories about Lone Jack and the haunting surrounding it.
Yeah, so that's part of the reason why we wanted to tell the story of Lone Jack is because there's not a lot of information out there on the internet and, no books really on the ghosts and the paranormal happening here. And we actually got some interesting EVPs.
We sure did.
Yeah.
We didn't know we did really either. Like we literally just finished listening back through most of our audio. We recorded a lot, so we haven't even listened to everything yet. But
we probably listened to 2/3 of our audio.
Yeah, and we actually re-recorded the end of this podcast because we were like, oh, we didn't get a whole lot. We just have this one EVP that we're gonna share from this one group, and then we listened to all our audio, and we're like, ooh.
We got some stuff and potentially even an intelligent spirit in one of our EVPs.
Potentially,
potentially, which I guess goes against us saying. But then the rest of them are definitely residual noises.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be my assumption.
So do we want to do the potentially intelligent EVP first? Because that actually... So we haven't talked yet about the Cave Hotel, which was owned and operated by the Cave family. So at the very beginning of this episode, we told the account from Jesse Cave. And so just a quick little background on the caves. So the Cave Hotel was right in the middle of the battlefield. The hotel was owned by Bartlett Cave and his wife Lucinda, and then they had 3 children, son William, another son Jesse, and their daughter Phineas
and Ferb.
Well, I think Dan said
I think it's Finola.
Finola, but there's an R on the end.
Like, what do you call that? Is it Finn?
Oh yeah, what would you say for a nickname?
Is it Finarella?
Finarella? It's okay, I'll just spell it for you guys and you correct me. It's Pheneller.
Can I look at it?
Yeah. Fenneller. But I wonder if that R is kind of... Do you say it?
Feneller. It sounds... I have no idea. Feneller. I like it. Feneller. Feneller. I want to see what Google says.
Pause.
No. Let's just keep...
Live Googling.
Feneller.
How do you say... Oh, it's
Sorry, what?
A-R.
Oh, my lord. I cannot type.
I can never type when someone's watching me.
Pronunciation. That's not the problem right now.
Vanilla? It's apparently a name that
Phenylephrine.
That Google doesn't know.
That's,
It's gotta be some kind of family name, because it's funny, they name their boys such basic names, William and Jesse.
So it's really just anyone's best guess.
We're gonna call her Finn.
Finn, yeah, Finn. Finn.
Back to the battle. So during the battle, Bartlett was away from home. No one knows why, but he was probably just away on business or something. But Lucinda and her 3 children were home. At the time, William was 10, Jesse was 5, and Finn was a toddler. During the battle, the hotel caught fire, and Lucinda and her children were forced to flee, and they huddled a short distance away in tall weeds. It was there that Lucinda was mortally wounded. She lived for a few weeks before she succumbed to her wounds.
Yeah.
So that's pretty tragic. Like, that's just shows that civilians were caught up in this battle that, they didn't ask for it. I think the Union took over her home as like a field hospital, but then the Confederates burned the hotel to get the union out, and then that's when Lucinda and her children had to flee. So, so it's just sad that then Lucinda passed away because of all that. Because it's a tragic that they have a name to.
Yeah, I think that helps is like having a specific character, because obviously with a lot of the people, the soldiers buried in the cemetery, you don't have specific stories about them as
who they
much.
were.
Yeah, so I wonder if that's part of the, I don't know, appeal feels like the wrong word, but what draws people to that house specifically.
And they have the bed that Lucinda died in. So it was not original to the cave home, but it was the bed she passed away in. So there is a trigger object, if you will, and and I guess I don't know if we've mentioned. So the building that exists now was not the original cave hotel, because obviously it burned down, but it was rebuilt shortly after. They don't have an exact date, so the current building was built sometime between 1863 and the 1880s. So it is so the building that exists is still very old, and it was just kind of used as a residence and like a tanning salon, and then I think Dan said the Historical Society bought it in the
Fairly recent,
yeah, I can't remember the exact date, but
I feel like it was
2007 maybe?
Something like that.
It's somewhere in my recordings, but anyways, so we did an EVP session inside the Cave Hotel, and we will play that for you now.
If Lucinda Cave is here, I know you had a pretty horrific ending to your time in your home. You have anything to say, or just want to show us that you're still around? You can knock or move something or say something. We'll be quiet for a while. Okay, so we're going to play that one more time, and this clip will just kind of focus in on the sound, and then we'll kind of talk about what we think after we play it one more time. All right, so that was when we were sitting in the Cave Hotel, kind of on the floor, just having a short EVP session.
We were next to Lucinda, the bed that Lucinda passed away in, and there's a photo of her and her family also in that room.
And you can kind of hear there is a little bit of like audio distortion. We heard a lot of that kind of that crackling sound. Initially, we thought that might be something, but it happened so frequently that we kind of ruled that out as something other than just like distortion. And I do know that like my boots were making a lot of noise. Like every time I moved, they'd make a sound
that sounded crackling, and we were like, oh yeah. Especially because there was a story about someone.
Yeah, they said that the gunshot in the cave home sounded like popcorn in a kettle, and we're like, oh my god, it does.
Did we capture that?
But it was my shoe.
So we debunked that.
Yeah.
But what makes this one seem actually intelligent and because Emily asked, like, knock for us, and there's 3 distinct like tapping sounds, and they're almost exactly spaced out the same. Yeah. And we don't capture that. I mean, we did I think it was like a 20-minute EVP session, and we never got 3 noises like that.
And to me, it sounds specifically like a fingernail tapping. And we compared audio because this one was recorded on my iPhone, and Kayla was recording on her digital recorder at the same time, and we heard it. Didn't we hear it faintly?
We heard it very faintly on my digital recorder, so that's also compelling that it wasn't just in your phone.
Right, yeah, but it just definitely sounded much closer in my phone, which...
You were the one asking the question.
I was asking the question, and you could also say maybe it's my shoe, but I still just don't think so. But, I mean, we can't conclusively say, oh, that was Lucinda knocking, but...
I mean, I don't know if any EVP is truly...
No, some
100% conclusive.
Some of them just come through with like official ghost stamp on them, but
but we think this is compelling, and you know.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. All right, so now we are going to play the EVP that I referred to in my theory section. I'm not really going to say anything about it just yet, other than it was recorded by the Paranormal Activity Investigators group when they went in 2019. I'll talk about it later. You can just go in and hear whatever you want to hear right now. FYI, this clip is kind of loud, so if you have headphones or you're in your car or something, you might want to turn it down so you don't get mad at us.
Fair warning.
Yeah. Okay.
Would you give us a sign of your presence?
We think that sounds like cannon or artillery sounds. When we first got to the cemetery and Dan was just kind of showing us around, we heard fireworks going off.
Fireworks are
and then we were like bummed because we thought, oh man, I bet that's what that noise is they just picked up someone in the neighborhood doing fireworks. But then when we listened to it again, we're like, that is not fireworks sound.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, this EVP in particular is kind of what made me make my initial, I don't want to say conclusion because I didn't make a conclusion, but my initial just thought that if there is a haunting at Lone Jack, it might be residual. But I think the most interesting thing about this EVP for us is we actually played it for Dan while we were talking with him, and because Kayla records everything, she recorded that interaction. I had no idea she was recording it. So we're going to play that for you now because it was a very interesting moment.
Right, and I mean, Dan has been to Civil War enactments, and he might say that in this clip, actually.
Yeah.
I might be getting ahead of myself. But, he's got some experience hearing cannon noises and such.
Right. Yeah, which is better than me. Like, I watched Patriot once. Does that count? Or Pirates of the Caribbean? Like, I've heard cannons.
Oh, and as a quick FYI, we replayed the audio within this clip with Dan, so you will get to listen to it again here shortly.
Because if I heard that, if I was sitting here and heard it right now, I would immediately, wow, that doesn't sound like a car backfiring.
No. But see, that's the thing. They didn't hear it
at the time.
At the time, which is, so I don't know. We're going to go over there.
Well,
maybe,
was it in the evening?
Said they were here from 7 to 10:30. So.
Okay, that's like, when a dump truck is dumping, and sometimes the door, bam,
sure.
It makes it loud kind of noise. But at that time of the evening, they wouldn't be doing that. And it happened all within like a 10-second span.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was like a 4-second.
Okay.
How long that clip was. Yeah, because I was like, it sounds.
Yeah, you can play it again. Yeah, it's very legit.
It sounded just like.
Give us a sign of your presence.
Yeah. Wow. And that was just 14 seconds.
Okay, that's really cool.
Isn't that? Yeah.
We let that one, because they had
That's what got us
things,
really.
Was,
I mean, we had already known the history of this place and thought it was fascinating, but then hearing that, we're like, we gotta get down there.
Yeah, that's not somebody shutting their tailgate. Or that's not somebody's garage door doing something weird. That's wow. That's really fascinating.
Because we listened back to that when we were sitting in the house because we wanted to see if it kind of
sounded like fireworks, maybe,
sounded
or
like what we'd heard earlier. We're like, that doesn't sound the same at all.
That didn't even sound like fireworks.
No.
Like a Roman candle thing. That had a really unique
sound.
Like
that boom.
Yeah. That was.
Wow.
Okay, so we have 2 more EVPs that we caught within the same 15-minute recording. And
when we were talking to Dan.
Yeah, like we weren't even doing like an EVP session or anything. We were just talking, and you can hear like Dan's talking.
He's talking about the battle because we were just asking some follow-up questions and just some more information.
Yeah, so when you're listening to this, like you'll hear Dan talking. I think we respond a couple times, and then there's something else, and we won't say what it is yet. We'll just let you hear and see whatever it is you think. So, and these recordings, we didn't get the sounds you'll hear. We didn't get them in any of the other recordings that we did while at the Lone Jack
battlefield.
Yeah, wow, words.
But yeah, we have hours of audio, and we don't. If we were consistently hearing these similar noises, then I would just write it off as it sounds from the town. But these 2 separate noises happen within 2 minutes of each other, and it's the only time we capture anything like that. Yep. So I will now let you guys make an assumption about it.
Yep.
telling you about, would have had a minimum of 4, ideally 6 horses to pull each cannon in the carriage, and it had a limber attached to it with an ammunition chest. So, and they had extra horses. I was reading about that. Have a full complement to take the field for field artillery.
Okay, so what we think we heard starts immediately after the kind of, you hear 3 beeps like a car backing up, and then the sound starts. But we have a shorter version of this clip, and we'll play that next so you can hear it one more time, and then we'll talk about it.
Yep.
I was reading about that. Have a full complement to take the
Okay, one more time.
One more time.
Complement.
All right, so I know we kind of ended up slowly narrowing in on the sound through the different recordings, but to us that sounded very clearly like a scream and not just like a, I'm playing a game and it went badly scream. It sounded like somebody was screaming in pain.
Right, like it reminds me of if you guys are film people, like the Wilhelm scream that they used in a lot of, well, they still use it today, but like an agony scream.
Yeah, and it is important to note, like we've mentioned several times, that we're in the middle of town, so potentially it could be a person screaming, but I feel like there's a problem regardless if they had that scream going on, just because, like, was that car backing up into them? I don't know, maybe, but... And
I'd like to think, I mean, we didn't hear this at the time, so I'd like to think if I had, I would have paused and been like, is that person okay?
Right, because there were 3 of us there, and we were right next to a pretty busy gas station, so we heard people coming and going, but I only heard, like, car sounds, like doors closing and stuff. I don't really think
we didn't hear talking, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that longer scream near the end that we kind of focused on was the strongest part of that recording, but I shortly before that feel like there's a shorter scream that you can hear. It's just harder to pull that one out. But we do have one more recording from this
same clip
conversation, and we'll play that one now.
Yes.
Now, the very next day, on the 17th, I didn't tell you this, but you probably read it, the Union soldier, Foster's troops.
And here's that recording one more time.
Probably read it, the Union soldier, Foster's troops.
So obviously we did kind of amplify that sound a little bit to try to pick it up a bit more.
Try to hear, like, to us it definitely sounds like maybe 2, potentially 2 voices, and to me it sounds like commands being barked. Like,
right. Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me very clearly. Now, it was nighttime by then. It was dark. There is a chance there was a game going on somewhere, but they only made the sound, like Kayla said, in that short, like, 4 or 5 minute section of time, and it only happened those 2 times, because we listened through this whole recording and we never heard it again.
Or even any other kind of talking we didn't pick up.
And we were pretty much outside in that same area for the next hour. Yeah, so we never heard it again, and we've listened back through audio and we didn't hear it in person, and there were other things we did hear, so it would be interesting why we would hear this and not,
other talking, or because there are houses right there, and when our audio recording didn't seem to pick up that kind of noise. So I don't know, it seemed pretty compelling to me that we were on the battlefield, and to me it doesn't even just sound like chatter, it sounds very commandish.
Yeah, it sounds like legit, like something serious is happening, and I don't know. It's interesting to hear something like that knowing where we are. So I guess that's all I will say, and I think it does tie very well into the potential cannon fire EVP that we played earlier. Like, it's...
And a scream, and it kind of goes with the scream and the orders and the cannon fire. That's all battle sounds.
And it kind of does go back very nicely to the residual, place haunting idea, or place memory. Just put all the names together. Residual place stone tape.
That's Kayla and Emily's theory.
Yeah, that's... Why not? Anyways, like, potentially, maybe it's not a ghost. Maybe it's just a recording of a very powerful moment that happened there. Maybe we tapped into Esther.
That's right. We got to
the psychic Esther. We got there. your digital recording is able to get into the whatever
dimensions.
energy field. Yeah, there you go. You need to add a review on Amazon. This recorder taps into parallel dimensions. Anyways, talking.
So that's our Battle of Lone Jack episode.
If you hear noises, it's my cat licking her paw right next to the microphone.
that is what
Kira, hey, can you stop?
like
Thank you.
right there.
Yeah, so that's the episode, plus some cat licking, potentially. I think that one surprised us.
Yeah, because it's funny, on the drive back from Lone Jack, we were like, man, we were really bummed because we didn't think we got anything, didn't have any experiences, and it was still fascinating talking to Dan and the history part, but we, it was kind of one of our first of us trying to do a legit investigation, and so we were kind of bummed, like nothing happened, and then here we are listening back, and it's like, whoa, we actually got a number of compelling things, and
it's interesting. Yes, we did get the knocking when we were doing the EVP session where we asked Lucinda a question, but I think the most interesting things that we got, we weren't even trying to get necessarily. We were just trying to record audio just to include in our history section.
Right, that's true. It wasn't even when we were trying to get a call and response.
Yeah, because we were listening back and we were editing, and we're like, wait,
what was that?
Did you hear that sound? We're like, that's not normal, is it?
Thank you, Dan Hadley, for your time and, for sharing all the history with us and helping us get some EVPs.
Yeah.
And, if you guys ever find yourself in the Kansas City area, definitely check out the Lone Jack Historical Society because, there's a whole museum, too, and we have a lot of audio from Dan touring the museum that we hope to include maybe on a website or some way. We'll get that to you because there's just a lot of cool other interesting Civil War history and facts that we just aren't relevant per se to this episode, but yeah,
we learned a lot.
We sure did.
We learned good.
We learned good.
Is there anything else you wanted to bring up before we wrap this up?
I know. Oh, I do. Yes, there is. I do want to call out. So in our previous episode, I have to correct myself on my gin fun fact because I said that gin was founded in England, and that's not what I meant to say. It was made popular in England. It was actually founded in the Netherlands, I think, but then in the 1600s it was made popular in England because it was really cheap, and people like to get drunk for cheap.
That's why I like gin.
Yeah.
And Kayla should share the gin cocktail I made her that was highly effective.
Yeah, we actually had to pause recording because we were in a great spot, but then we came down too quickly, and then we were so tired. So yeah, gin got us drunk quick, but then we couldn't keep working. I guess we could have, but it would have been a really monotone
I make
episode.
a great drink for a very quick buzz and then a very early bedtime.
Yeah.
Call it the hammer.
The hammer. I like it. We'll have a cocktail book.
Yeah, the hammer.
The hammer.
We also learned that gin used to be called Mother's Ruin, so that's sad.
Yeah.
That's what my cats don't like when I drink it. They're like, Mommy, no.
No, it's going to ruin you, Mother.
I've read about this on Wikipedia. I have a completely unrelated fun fact. It's a Kansas City fun fact that surprised me. I saw it in the Star last week.
It's official. So
official
newspaper.
There has been an uptick of UFO sightings in the Kansas City area.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And they're like, I think they're like 3 or 4. But what's interesting is that they're all the same, basically, disc-shaped UFO, shocker, but it had a bunch of rectangular windows on the front, and they all say that they saw illumination coming from inside of it, and they're all kind of in the same Smithville area, Smithville Lake, which is a pretty rural, I hate that word.
I know.
Rural area, which isn't terribly far.
Yeah, no, it's in the Kansas City metro, right? Wow.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess Kansas City actually does have a significant amount of UFO sightings. So I don't know if it's just because there's just an awful lot of sky and not a lot of light pollution. So maybe we're just always looking up and being like, what the
is that?
What the hell is that? I almost swore too powerfully. I had to stop myself. This isn't a kid's show, but I don't know if we want to do that.
The UFO just brings it out in you.
Aliens. Yeah, I don't know. Aliens. That's my thing.
That is interesting. Wow.
Maybe we'll do an alien episode at some point. I don't know any.
Oh, yeah. Well, especially if there's been an uptick and there might be...
Maybe we'll see an alien.
Yeah, maybe it will be episode worthy if there's an uptick in activity of...
Oh, there is like an association with owls and aliens and alien abductions, so maybe that owl that attacked me at Lone Jack is part of... Maybe I was almost abducted by a stealthy owl in a cemetery.
See, it'll all come full circle. It'll tie together.
It did. That was terrifying. All right, well, I think that's the episode, right?
It is. Look at that.
I don't know what number episode this is. This is episode
4. Potentially.
We're so certain.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But we hope you enjoyed it, and please leave us a review or a comment on our Instagram. What you think of the EVPs, and if you just think we're crazy, but
we might.
Or if you think we caught a crime, if it was a human scream.
Yeah, we're a little worried this might be the origin story of our kind of Only Murders in the Building podcast, where we stumble upon an actual crime and then somehow end up having to solve it.
Right.
If that's the case, I'm not that smart, and I don't really think that should happen, frankly.
Yeah, I would be a terrible FBI detective of any kind, because I'm not good at...
I listen to a lot of true crime, but passively, I think I would fail in an actual real life situation. So just
don't call us for your murders.
Who do you call? Not us.
Not us. Not to solve your murders.
No. We just accidentally find things.
But anyways, leave us a review either on, Spotify, Instagram, Apple Podcast, all the places.
Wherever we are, wherever you find us, talk about us.
Yeah, let us know what you think. Mm-hmm. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with the next episode.
Yeah. Toodaloo.
Bye.
Almost swore again, Jesus.
Potty mouth.